The small town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where time seemed to move a little slower. White fences lined the quiet streets, maple trees shaded the sidewalks, and every evening the golden light of the setting sun painted the neighborhood in warm colors. On Maple Street lived a young man named Ethan Parker. Ethan was known by everyone as the quiet one. He wasn't shy because he feared people. He simply preferred listening over speaking. While others filled the air with words, Ethan found comfort in silence. He enjoyed early morning walks, old books, and the peaceful sound of rain tapping against his bedroom window. Directly across from his house stood a pale blue home with a wide front porch. That house belonged to Emma Collins. Ethan first noticed Emma when they were children. She was sitting on the porch steps with a sketchbook in her lap, drawing flowers from her mother's garden. The sunlight danced through her golden brown hair, and every few moments she smiled at her own drawings. Even at 12 years old, Ethan remembered, thinking she looked like someone who carried sunshine wherever she went. Years passed. The neighborhood changed little, but Ethan and Emma grew older. Every morning, Ethan would see Emma leave for school with a cheerful wave to her parents. Every autumn, he watched her rake colorful leaves into giant piles for neighborhood children to jump into. Every winter, he secretly admired the snowmen she built on the front lawn. And every spring, she planted flowers beside the porch. The seasons came and went like gentle pages turning in a book. With every passing year, Ethan's feelings quietly grew. It wasn't the kind of love people often talked about. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind that lived in small moments. The way Emma stopped to help elderly neighbors carry groceries. The way she greeted every dog she passed as if meeting an old friend. The way she looked at sunsets as though they were rare treasures. Ethan loved all those little things. But he never told her. Not once. Sometimes he imagined walking across the street and telling her everything. He imagined saying her name and confessing how long she had lived inside his heart. Yet, whenever the moment seemed possible, fear gently held him back. What if she didn't feel the same? What if their comfortable friendship disappeared forever? So he stayed silent. Years slipped by. Emma became a teacher at the local elementary school. Ethan opened a small bookstore near the town square. Life continued peacefully. They spoke often enough to remain friends. Emma would occasionally stop by the bookstore and recommend novels to customers. Sometimes she brought Ethan homemade cookies. Sometimes they sat on the porch after sunset and talked about simple things, weather, books, dreams, and memories. Those evenings became Ethan's favorite moments. Yet every time he returned home, he carried the same secret back across the street. Summer settled gently over Willow Creek. Warm evenings stretched long into the night, and the town seemed wrapped in a peaceful glow. For Ethan Parker, life continued much as it always had. He opened his bookstore every morning, greeted familiar customers, and returned home each evening to the quiet comfort of Maple Street. Yet there was one part of his routine he never grew tired of. Emma. Some people measured time by calendars. Ethan measured it by moments that involved her. A wave from across the street. A conversation beside the mailbox. A smile shared during a neighborhood gathering. Tiny moments that most people would forget. To Ethan, they were unforgettable. One Saturday afternoon, Emma stopped by the bookstore carrying an iced coffee and a bright smile. "I brought you something," she said. Ethan laughed softly. "You know you don't have to bring me gifts every time you visit." "I know," she replied. "I just wanted to." She handed him the coffee. The gesture was simple, yet Ethan felt his heart warm in a way he could never explain. That was the difficult thing about loving Emma. She was kind to everyone. Every smile felt special. Every act of kindness felt personal. But Ethan never knew whether those moments meant anything more to her. So he continued carrying his feelings in silence. Weeks turned into months. Autumn arrived. Golden leaves drifted through the neighborhood like pieces of sunlight. One evening, the town hosted its annual harvest festival. Families filled the streets. Music played from the town square. Children laughed as they ran between food stalls and carnival games. Ethan spent most of the evening helping at a bookstore booth. As the sun began to set, he noticed Emma standing alone near a row of glowing lanterns. She looked beautiful beneath the soft orange light. For a moment, Ethan felt something different. Not fear, not hesitation. Hope. He walked toward her. His heart pounded with every step. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight he would finally tell her. But before he could speak, another voice called her name. A young man approached and wrapped Emma in a friendly hug. Ethan stopped walking. The hopeful words disappeared before reaching his lips. Later, he learned the man was only a college friend visiting town. Still, the moment lingered. It reminded him how fragile opportunities could be, and how easily they slipped away. Winter arrived soon afterward. Snow covered the rooftops. The streets became quiet beneath blankets of white. One snowy evening, the power went out across part of the neighborhood. Ethan was lighting candles when someone knocked on his door. It was Emma. "Mind if I stay here for a while?" she asked with a grin. My heater stopped working. For hours, they sat near the fireplace. They talked about childhood memories, favorite books, dream vacations, funny mistakes they had made over the years. Outside, snow fell silently. More than once, Ethan almost confessed everything. The words rose to the surface, then retreated. Fear remained stronger. When the power finally returned, Emma stood to leave. At the door, she paused. "You know something, Ethan?" "What?" "You've always been one of my favorite people." For a second, his heart nearly stopped. But she simply smiled and walked back across the street. The snow continued falling, and Ethan stood alone in the doorway, wondering what those words truly meant. Months passed. Spring returned to Willow Creek. Flowers bloomed once again around Emma's porch. Life felt peaceful, predictable, certain, until one ordinary Tuesday evening. Ethan noticed a moving truck brochure resting in Emma's hand. She was sitting on her porch swing, staring at it quietly. A strange feeling settled in his chest. A feeling he couldn't explain. Not yet, but deep down, for the very first time in years, Ethan felt that change was coming. And this time, it might change everything. The days following that Tuesday felt strangely different to Ethan. At first, he tried to convince himself that the moving brochure meant nothing. People looked at brochures all the time. It could have been for a vacation, a friend's recommendation, a random piece of mail. But deep inside, a quiet worry refused to disappear. Each evening, when he looked across the street, he noticed Emma spending more time on her porch than usual. Sometimes she sat alone with a notebook in her lap. Sometimes she stared at the sunset as though she were trying to memorize it. The sight unsettled him. One Friday afternoon, Emma entered the bookstore. As always, she smiled when she saw him. Yet something about the smile felt heavier. "Hey, Ethan." "Hey, yourself." She wandered through the shelves, running her fingers along the books. For a while, neither of them said much. Then Emma stopped beside the window. "I need to tell you something." The words landed softly, but Ethan's heart immediately tightened. He set down the book he was holding. "What is it?" Emma took a slow breath. "I've been offered a teaching position in Portland." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Outside, people continued walking through the town square. Cars rolled past. Life moved forward. Yet for Ethan, everything seemed to stop. "Portland?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded. "It's a wonderful opportunity." He forced a smile. "That's amazing." She smiled back, though her eyes carried uncertainty. "I think so too." "Think." "Not no, think." The word echoed in Ethan's mind. For years, he had imagined countless futures. In every one of them, Emma remained across the street. He had never imagined a future where she was gone. "When would you leave?" he asked. "If I accept it? By the end of summer?" End of summer. Only a few months away. The realization settled heavily inside him. For the rest of the afternoon, they talked about practical things, the school, the city, the apartment she might rent. Ethan listened carefully. But part of him could hear only one sentence. She might leave. That night, sleep refused to come. He sat beside his bedroom window long after midnight. Across the street, Emma's porch light glowed softly, a light he had looked at for years, a light that had somehow become part of home. For the first time, he wondered what Maple Street would feel like without it. The thought hurt more than he expected. Days passed. Then weeks. The town moved forward as if nothing had changed. But inside Ethan, a quiet battle had begun. Part of him wanted to protect himself. If Emma left, perhaps silence would be easier. Perhaps he could simply wish her happiness and keep his feelings buried forever. Summer seemed to move faster after Ethan made his decision. The days slipped by like pages turning in a familiar book. Each sunrise brought him closer to the moment he had imagined for years, and each sunset reminded him that time was running out. Emma had officially accepted the teaching position in Portland. The news spread quickly through Willow Creek. Neighbors congratulated her. Friends organized farewell dinners. Students brought her handwritten cards filled with love and gratitude. Everyone was excited for her future. Everyone except Ethan. He was happy for her, truly. But beneath that happiness lived a quiet ache that grew, stronger with every passing day. Only 4 weeks remained before her departure. Then 3. Then 2. Still, he hadn't found the courage to tell her. Every time he planned to speak, doubt appeared. What if his confession made things awkward? What if it burdened her before such a major life change? What if she didn't feel the same? The questions followed him everywhere. One evening, a gentle rain fell over Willow Creek. Ethan sat inside his bookstore, watching droplets race down the windows. Just before closing time, the door opened. Emma stepped inside. Her hair was slightly damp from the rain. "Thought I'd find you here," she said. Ethan smiled. "Where else would I be?" She laughed softly. For a few minutes, they talked about books and memories. Then Emma glanced toward the darkening sky outside. "Want to take a walk?" His heart skipped. "Sure." They left the bookstore together. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets quiet and shining beneath the streetlights. The town felt peaceful, almost dreamlike. They walked slowly through familiar streets, passing places that had shaped their lives. The elementary school where Emma taught. The park where they played as children. The old ice cream shop that somehow never changed. Every corner held a memory. Every memory felt heavier knowing she would soon leave. Eventually, they reached the small lake at the edge of town. The water reflected the colors of sunset fading into evening. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence felt comfortable, the kind shared only by people who truly know each other. Then Emma broke it. "Do you ever wonder how life changes so quickly?" Ethan looked at the water. "All the time." She smiled sadly. "It feels like yesterday we were kids riding bicycles down Maple Street. Now you're moving across the country." Her smile faded slightly. "Yeah." The single word carried more emotion than he expected. For a moment, neither moved. A soft breeze drifted across the lake. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course." She stared at the horizon. "I'm excited about Portland." Then she paused. "But I'm scared too." Ethan turned toward her. Emma rarely admitted fear. "What scares you?" She hesitated. "Leaving people behind?" His chest tightened. 7 days. That was all Ethan had left. For years, he had convinced himself there would always be another tomorrow. Another walk. Another conversation. Another chance to tell Emma how he felt. Now tomorrow suddenly seemed fragile. Every morning he woke with the same thought. Tell her. And every night he went to bed wondering why it felt so difficult. The town was preparing for Emma's farewell gathering. A small event organized by neighbors and friends. Tables were set up in the community park. String lights hung from the trees. Everyone wanted to celebrate the young teacher who had touched so many lives. The evening arrived warm and calm. Laughter filled the air. Children ran across the grass. Music drifted softly through the summer breeze. Emma stood near the center of it all, smiling as people shared memories and well wishes. Ethan watched from a distance. The sight filled him with both pride and sadness. She was loved by everyone, and soon she would be gone. As darkness settled, the mayor gave a short speech. Several of Emma's students spoke about how much she had inspired them. Many people wiped away tears, including Emma. The gathering slowly began to end. Families headed home. Lights were turned off one by one. Soon only a few people remained. Then even they left. At last, Ethan and Emma found themselves alone beneath the glowing string lights. The park had become quiet. Peaceful. The kind of silence Ethan had always loved. But tonight it felt different. Tonight it carried a sense of urgency. Emma sat on a wooden bench and looked up at the stars. "I can't believe I'm leaving in 2 days." 2 days. The word struck him harder than he expected. Neither spoke for a while. Then Emma smiled softly. "You know, Ethan, whenever I think about Willow Creek, one person always comes to mind first." His heart began to race. "Who?" She laughed. "You already know." Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Years of uncertainty had taught him not to assume anything. Emma looked toward him. Her eyes reflected the soft glow of the lights. "You're one of the best things about this town." The words settled deeply inside him. For a moment, fear disappeared. The years of silence, the endless hesitation, the countless missed opportunities. They suddenly felt heavier than rejection ever could. If he stayed silent now, he would carry that regret forever. Ethan took a slow breath. then another. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't stop. Emma. She turned toward him. Something in his voice made her expression change. Gentle concern. Curiosity. Hope. I need to tell you something. His heart pounded so loudly he wondered if she could hear it. For years he had imagined this conversation. Hundreds of times. Yet now that it had arrived, the words felt surprisingly simple. Because the truth had always been simple. I've loved you for a long time. Emma's eyes widened. Ethan continued before fear could return. I think I've loved you since we were kids. His voice was quiet. Honest. Steady. I loved every conversation we ever had. Every walk. Every book recommendation. Every ordinary moment. Tears gathered in his eyes. Not from sadness. From finally releasing a truth he had carried alone for so many years. I never told you because I was afraid. He laughed softly. A lot more afraid than I should have been. Emma didn't interrupt. She simply listened. The way she always had. The way he had always loved. Ethan looked down briefly, then back at her. I don't know what happens next. His voice almost broke. I don't know if you feel the same. A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. And suddenly Ethan realized she was crying too. For one long, silent moment, neither spoke. The stars shimmered above them. The summer air stood still, and Emma slowly reached for his hand. Then she whispered words Ethan never expected to hear. Words that would change everything. Ethan, I've been waiting for you to say that. Ethan could barely breathe. The world seemed to stand still around him. The soft lights hanging from the trees, the warm summer air. The distant sound of crickets, all of it faded into the background. Only Emma's words remained. I've been waiting for you to say that. For a moment, Ethan wondered if he had heard her correctly. Years of silence had trained him to expect disappointment, not miracles. Emma gently squeezed his hand. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. I thought you would never tell me, she whispered. Ethan stared at her, speechless. You knew? Not at first, Emma said with a small laugh. But after a while, I started hoping. She looked down at their joined hands. Then I started feeling the same way. The words filled the empty spaces in Ethan's heart that he had carried for years. All those evenings. All those walks. All those moments he thought belonged only to him. They hadn't. Emma had been carrying her own quiet feelings too. I was scared, she admitted. Me too, Ethan replied. They laughed through their tears. The years between them suddenly felt lighter. Not wasted, just waiting. For the first time, neither of them had anything left to hide. The stars shone brightly above Willow Creek as they sat together and talked for hours. About missed chances. About fears. About all the things they had never been brave enough to say. And when the conversation finally slowed, a difficult reality remained. Emma was still leaving. In 2 days. The thought returned like a shadow. Emma noticed the concern in Ethan's eyes. Hey, she said softly. Yeah? Do you remember what you once told me? Ethan frowned. I've told you a lot of things. She smiled. When we were teenagers, I was nervous about a school competition. You said something I'll never forget. What was it? Emma's eyes sparkled. You said that distance doesn't matter when people truly care about each other. Slowly, Ethan remembered. Years ago, a simple conversation, a simple sentence, one he had completely forgotten. Emma hadn't. Portland isn't forever, she said, and neither is distance. Ethan felt hope rise inside him. Not the uncertain hope he had carried for years. A stronger one. A real one. The next 2 days passed quickly. When the morning of Emma's departure arrived, the neighborhood gathered to say goodbye. Boxes were packed. The moving truck waited. Friends hugged. Parents cried. Children waved handmade cards. And through it all, Ethan stood beside Emma. Not as the boy who secretly loved her, but as the man who had finally told the truth. Before leaving, Emma walked across the street one last time. Together they stood on Ethan's porch. The same porch where he had spent years watching the light from her house. Promise me something, she said. Anything. Don't stop living while I'm gone. He smiled. Only if you promise the same. Deal. Then she hugged him tightly. Longer than before, as if trying to carry a piece of Willow Creek with her. When she finally stepped away, she kissed his cheek. A small gesture, yet it felt like sunlight after a long winter. Hours later, the truck disappeared down the road. For the first time in years, the porch across the street stood empty. the light was gone. And yet Ethan didn't feel lonely, because love was no longer trapped inside silence. Months passed. Letters became phone calls. Phone calls became weekend visits. Weekend visits became shared dreams. And 1 year later, on a warm summer evening, Emma returned to Willow Creek. Not to visit, to stay. Together they opened a reading center for children beside Ethan's bookstore. The town celebrated. The maple trees still lined the streets. The sunset still painted the sky gold. But now, whenever Ethan looked across the street, he no longer wondered what might have been. He knew. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are not the loudest ones. Sometimes they are built from quiet moments, patient hearts, and truth spoken at exactly the right time. And sometimes the light you've been searching for all your life has been shining just across the porch,